Captain Zekthara's 4 eyes focused on the holographic display floating before her command chair. The star map showed thousands of systems, trade routes spanning across 3 spiral arms, and the territories of dozens of species. But there was something wrong with it. Something that had bothered her for years. The map simply stopped. Not at the edge of explored space, not at some natural barrier like a black hole or radiation field. It just ended at a clean, straight line that cut through what should have been normal star systems. Beyond that line, the map showed nothing but gray void, as if that entire section of the galaxy didn't exist. Navigation officer, Zekthara called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded starships for over 30 years. Show me Sector 7 Alpha again. The young Viridian at the navigation console tapped his scaled fingers across the controls. The display zoomed in on the mysterious boundary. Stars and planets populated the space right up to an invisible wall, and then, nothing. Captain, the navigator said hesitantly, the computer shows this as the edge of charted space, but the stellar surveys indicate there should be hundreds of systems beyond this point. Zekthara had seen this same puzzle on every ship she'd served on. Every captain she'd asked gave the same response: some areas were restricted for safety reasons. When she pressed for details, conversations would change direction quickly. Orders would come down reassigning curious officers to distant posts. "Ma'am," her communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council vessel Harmony's Dream. They're requesting permission to come aboard." That was strange. They weren't scheduled to meet any Council ships in this sector. Zekthara's ship, the Stellar Wind, was on a routine cargo run between the Altair colonies and the Centauri trade hub. This was one of the busiest shipping lanes in the galaxy, but it was also very close to that mysterious empty zone on the maps. "Grant permission," she said. "Prepare the main docking bay." 20 minutes later, Zekthara stood in the docking bay watching a Council shuttle settle onto the deck. The Harmony's Dream was a diplomatic vessel, easily identified by its white hull and the golden emblem of the Galactic Council. What were diplomats doing out here? The shuttle's ramp lowered, and 3 figures emerged. The leader was Ambassador Jorakai, a tall Andromedian with the typical blue-gray skin and formal robes of his species. Behind him walked a squat Carillion engineer and a slender Aetherian whose translucent features shifted like smoke. "Captain Zekthara," Ambassador Jorakai said, extending his hand in the universal gesture of greeting. "Thank you for allowing us aboard. We have urgent business to discuss." "Of course, Ambassador. Please, follow me to my ready room." As they walked through the corridors of her ship, Zekthara noticed the ambassador kept glancing at the displays showing their current position. His expression grew more tense with each step. In her ready room, the ambassador declined offers of refreshment and got straight to business. "Captain, we've been monitoring your ship's navigation logs. You've been asking questions about the restricted zone." Zekthara felt her heart skip. She'd been careful to keep her curiosity private, discussing it only with her senior staff. "How could the Council know?" "I'm not sure what you mean, Ambassador." "Please, Captain. We know you've been studying the star charts, trying to understand why the maps end where they do. This behavior has been flagged by our monitoring systems." The Aetherian stepped forward, its voice like whispers of wind. "Captain, there are things in this galaxy that are beyond the understanding of most species. Some mysteries exist for the protection of all." "Protection from what?" Zekthara asked. "What's out there that's so dangerous the entire Galactic Council pretends it doesn't exist?" The 3 diplomats exchanged glances. Ambassador Jorakai sighed deeply. "Very well. But first, you must understand that what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. The knowledge is restricted to Council members and a select few ship captains who need to know for safety reasons." Zekthara leaned forward in her chair. After years of wondering, she might finally get answers. "That empty space on your maps isn't empty, Captain. It's inhabited. But the species that lives there, they're different from anything else in the galaxy." "Different how?" "They call themselves humans," the Carillion engineer spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble. "They appeared in that region about 300 of their years ago. Before that, our surveys showed normal space with typical developing worlds. Appeared? What do you mean appeared? Ambassador Jorakai activated a small device, and a holographic display showed a section of space. 3 centuries ago, our long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures in this region. When we sent investigation fleets, we found something impossible. The display changed, showing a dozen star systems. But something was wrong with them. The planets had been moved. Entire worlds had been repositioned into perfect geometric patterns around their stars. They moved planets? Zekthara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Not just moved them, the Etherian said. They moved them while they were inhabited. Billions of their people living on worlds that were relocated across light years of space as if they were just picking up marbles and placing them in new positions. The implications hit Zekthara like a physical blow. Moving a planet was theoretically possible with enough energy and technology, but moving inhabited worlds without killing everyone on them? The engineering required was beyond anything she could imagine. That's not possible, she said. The gravitational forces alone would tear the planets apart. That's what we thought too, Ambassador Jorakai replied. But somehow they did it. And that was just the beginning. The hologram changed again, now showing long-range sensor readings. Massive structures floated in space between the stars. They looked like cities, but they were the size of moons. They built these in less than 50 years. Each one houses hundreds of millions of their people. But here's what really frightens the Council, they're not just building them. They're growing them. Growing them? The structures are alive, Captain. Living space habitats that can repair themselves, adapt to threats, and even reproduce. We've watched them split in half and form 2 separate habitats, each one fully functional. Zekthara stared at the display, trying to process what she was seeing. Why haven't we made contact? If they're this advanced, surely they'd be valuable allies. The silence that followed her question was heavy with unspoken dread. Because the first contact teams never came back, the Carillion said quietly. Not a single one. We sent diplomatic missions, Ambassador Jorakai explained. Trade delegations. Scientific expeditions. Even military scouts. 18 different missions over the past 2 centuries. None returned. Were they destroyed? We don't know. Their ships simply vanished when they crossed into human space. No distress signals, no debris, nothing. They just stopped existing. The Etherian's form shifted, becoming more solid as it leaned forward. But that's not the strangest part. Every few years, we detect transmissions from that region. Communications between their worlds. And sometimes, just sometimes, we intercept messages that seem to be directed at us. What kind of messages? Ambassador Jorakai touched his device again. A recording began to play, the voice clear and, speaking in perfect Galactic standard, to the Galactic Council and all member species, we are aware of your existence and your interest in our territory. We request that you maintain your current distance for the mutual benefit of all parties. We harbor no hostile intentions, but we require isolation to complete our development. Thank you for your understanding. The recording ended, leaving the room in silence. That message was sent 40 years ago, the ambassador said. It was the only direct communication we've ever received from them. Since then, nothing. But why keep this secret? Zekthara asked. Why not tell people that there's an advanced species that wants to be left alone? Because it's not that simple, the Carillion engineer said. Show her the deep scans. The hologram changed one more time, and Zekthara's blood ran cold. The display now showed the entire human region of space, but from a different perspective. Every star system, every space habitat, every planetary structure was connected by streams of energy. Massive flows of power that linked their entire civilization into a single network. They're not just advanced, Captain, Ambassador Jorakai said grimly. They're turning their entire region of space into something that defies our understanding of physics. Those energy streams carry more power than most stars produce. And they're growing stronger every year. The Council's scientists believe they're preparing for something, the Etherian added. But we have no idea what. Some think they're planning to expand beyond their current territory. Others believe they're building defenses against some threat we can't see. And a few, the ambassador said quietly, think they might be preparing to leave this galaxy entirely. Zekthara stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars. Somewhere beyond her sight was a region of space where impossible things happened daily. Where beings called humans had accomplished feats that challenged everything she thought she knew about the universe. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because your ship's route takes you closer to their border than most, Ambassador Jorikai said. If something happens, if they decide to make contact or if their activities affect surrounding space, ships like yours will be the first to know. What should I do if that happens? Send a message to the Council immediately, then, retreat to a safe distance. Under no circumstances should you attempt to cross their border. And if they cross into our space? The three diplomats exchanged another look, and Zekthara realized this was the real reason for their visit. That's what we're afraid might happen soon, the ambassador said. Our long-range sensors have detected increased activity in their border systems. Something big is happening in human space, and we have no idea what it means for the rest of the galaxy. After the diplomats left, Zekthara stood alone in her ready room, staring at the star charts. The gray void that had puzzled her for years now seemed ominous rather than mysterious. Somewhere beyond that empty space on her maps, beings with unimaginable technology were building something that frightened the entire Galactic Council. She called her senior staff to the conference room and shared what she could without violating her oath of secrecy. Her navigation officer, science officer, and first mate listened in stunned silence as she explained about the restricted zone and the need for vigilance. Captain, her science officer asked, what if they're not hostile? What if they just want to be left alone? Then, we respect their wishes, Zekthara replied. But, we also stay ready for anything. Over the following weeks, as the Stellar Wind completed its cargo runs, Zekthara found herself constantly checking the long-range sensors. She ordered additional monitoring equipment installed and had her communications officer maintain open channels to the Council emergency network. The rest of her crew noticed the increased vigilance but didn't question it. They trusted their captain's judgment, even if they didn't understand the reasons behind her new precautions. 3 months after the diplomatic visit, Zekthara's vigilance proved justified. It started with a barely detectable energy surge on the long-range sensors. Her science officer brought it to her attention during the night shift, when most of the crew was asleep. Captain, he said, his voice tight with worry, you need to see this. Zekthara rushed to the bridge, still wearing her sleep clothes. The main display showed a sector map with a pulsing red indicator at the edge of human space. What am I looking at? Energy readings unlike anything in our databases, her science officer replied. The surge lasted only 12 minutes, but the power levels were equivalent to a stellar flare from a giant star. Where exactly did this happen? Right at the border. The exact edge of the restricted zone. Zek_Thara felt ice forming in her hearts. Send an encrypted message to the Council immediately. Include all sensor data. As her communications officer worked to send the message, the science officer called out again, Captain, I'm detecting something else. Long-range sensors are picking up movement in the human border systems. What kind of movement? Ships, Captain. Lots of them. More than our sensors can count. On the display, hundreds of contact indicators appeared along the human border. They were moving in perfect formation, heading toward the edge of their territory. Are they crossing into our space? No, ma'am. They're stopping exactly at the boundary line. But, Captain. The science officer's voice trailed off as he studied his instruments. What is it? These aren't normal ships. The energy signatures are massive. Each one of those contacts is putting out power readings larger than our biggest dreadnoughts. Zekthara stared at the display, watching the human fleet arrange itself along their border like a wall of steel and energy. Were they preparing for war? Setting up defenses? Or was this the beginning of something else entirely? Captain, her communications officer called out, we're receiving a response from the Council. They want us to maintain our position and continue monitoring. Additional council vessels are being dispatched to our location.
How long until they arrive?
18 hours, ma'am.
18 hours.
Zekthara looked at the display again, at the hundreds of human ships now motionless at their border. Whatever was happening in human space, it was bigger than anything the galaxy had seen before. All senior staff to the bridge, she ordered.
I want continuous monitoring of the human border.
If anything changes, if even one of those ships moves, I want to know immediately. As her crew took their positions, Zekthara couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing the calm before a storm that would change the galaxy forever.
Dares ask why?
The council fleet arrived exactly when promised, but even Captain Zekthara was surprised by its size. 47 ships from 12 different species, including the massive dreadnought Unity's Hammer commanded by Admiral Korvax himself. The Admiral was a legend throughout the galaxy, known for his tactical brilliance and steady nerves in crisis situations. But, when Admiral Korvax's shuttle docked with the stellar wind, Zekthara could see worry lines etched deep into his weathered features. "Captain," he said without preamble as he entered her ready room, "your reports have caused quite a stir on the Council homeworld. Half the representatives want to prepare for war, and the other half want to evacuate the border regions entirely.
What do you want to do, Admiral?"
"I want to understand what we're dealing with before we make any decisions that might get us all killed." He activated a portable holodisplay.
"Your sensor readings have been analyzed by the best scientific minds in the Council.
Their conclusions are disturbing."
The display showed detailed scans of the human ships still positioned along their border.
Each vessel was massive, some over 10 kilometers long, but their design was unlike anything in the galactic databases. "These ships don't just use advanced technology," Admiral Korvax explained. "They seem to violate several fundamental laws of physics. Look at these energy readings." The display highlighted various sections of the human vessels. "They're generating power levels that should require fuel consumption equal to what our largest battleships use in a year. But our sensors detect no fuel signatures, no matter/antimatter reactions, no fusion cores. The energy appears to be coming from nowhere."
"How is that possible?" "It isn't. At least, not according to any science we understand." The Admiral's expression grew grimmer.
"But that's not the most disturbing part.
Watch this."
The display showed a time-lapse recording from the past 18 hours. The human ships had remained motionless the entire time, but, occasionally, brief energy pulses would pass between them. "They're communicating," Zekthara observed.
"Not just communicating.
Every time one of those energy pulses occurs, we detect minor fluctuations in subspace throughout this entire sector. Somehow, their communications are affecting the fundamental structure of space itself."
Admiral Korvax paused the recording and zoomed in on one of the larger human vessels. "Our long-range scans show that this ship is hollow. Completely hollow.
The entire interior is one vast open space, but our sensors detect millions of life signs inside."
"Millions? How can millions of beings fit in a hollow space? We think the interior space is larger than the exterior dimensions." "Much larger." Zekthara stared at the image, trying to process what she was hearing. "That's impossible."
So is moving inhabited planets and building living space habitats, but they've done both.
Admiral Korvax turned off the display. "Captain, I'm going to share something with you that only a handful of people in the galaxy know. The Council has had indirect contact with humans before."
But the ambassador said all contact missions disappeared.
"They did.
But before they vanished, some of them managed to transmit partial reports."
The Admiral's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Captain, the humans aren't just advanced. They may not be entirely natural." "What do you mean?" 30 years ago, we sent a deep space probe to the edge of their territory. It was designed to be completely passive, just observing from a distance. For 3 weeks, it sent back routine sensor readings. Then, something intercepted it. Admiral Korvax activated another device, and a recording began to play.
It was clearly a transmission from a probe, but the voice that came through was human, speaking perfect galactic standard, Galactic Council Probe Designation Alpha 7, you are observing our territory without permission.
This is not appreciated.
The recording continued, but now the voice changed, becoming warmer and more conversational. However, we understand your curiosity.
You are worried about us. You see things you cannot explain and fear what you do not understand. This is natural.
Another voice joined the first, then another. Soon, dozens of different human voices were speaking in perfect harmony. We wish to ease your fears, but we cannot explain what we are becoming because you lack the framework to understand.
Your science is based on the physical universe as it appears to your senses. Ours has moved beyond such limitations.
The recording ended abruptly. The probe continued transmitting for another 6 hours, Admiral Korvax explained, but every signal was identical to that last message.
Then, it simply stopped.
They took control of our probe and used it to send us a message.
A message that raises more questions than it answers. What did they mean by what we are becoming? And how did they speak through our technology from light years away?
Before Zekthara could respond, her communications officer's voice came through the intercom. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the human border.
It's addressed to Admiral Korvax personally. Admiral Korvax and Captain Zekthara rushed to the bridge.
The main display showed an incoming transmission from the direction of the human fleet, but the signal was unlike anything in their communications protocols.
Put it through, Admiral Korvax ordered.
The transmission began, and immediately Zekthara knew they were experiencing something unprecedented. The voice that came through their speakers was clearly human, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Not just from the speakers, but from the walls, the air, even from inside their own minds.
Admiral Korvax of the Galactic Council Fleet, we greet you.
We are aware of your presence and your concerns about our activities. The voice paused, and, during that pause, every person on the bridge felt a strange tingling sensation, as if something was gently touching their thoughts. We apologize for the alarm our movements have caused. We are not preparing for war or planning to expand into your territory. We are preparing for a journey, and we wanted to ensure that our departure does not cause unintended consequences for your civilizations.
Admiral Korvax found his voice. This is Admiral Korvax. Who am I speaking with?
We are the Collective Council of Human Space.
We speak for all humans in this region.
We know this communication method is unfamiliar to you, but we hope you will bear with us.
Traditional electromagnetic signals are inadequate for the complexity of what we need to discuss. You said you're preparing for a journey. Where are you going?
Beyond this galaxy, Admiral. Beyond this dimension of reality.
We have outgrown the physical limitations of normal spacetime.
The bridge crew exchanged stunned glances.
Even with all their preparation, nothing could have readied them for this revelation. We don't understand, Admiral Korvax said. How can you travel beyond our galaxy? And what do you mean by beyond this dimension?
Your species still think of the universe in terms of matter and energy existing in 3 spatial dimensions plus time.
This is natural for beings bound by physical form. But reality is far more complex than your current science recognizes.
As the humans spoke, the air around the bridge began to shimmer. Patterns of light formed and dissolved, showing geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions.
We have learned to manipulate the fundamental structures that underlie physical reality. What you call moving planets, we consider simple rearrangement of localized spacetime. What you call impossible energy generation, we achieve by drawing power from dimensions that exist perpendicular to your normal space. Captain Zekthara stepped forward. Are you saying that humans have become something other than physical beings?
Some of us have, Captain Zekthara.
Others remain in physical form by choice. We are a species in transition.
For the past 3 centuries, we have been evolving beyond the limitations that constrain other sapient species.
How? Admiral Korvax asked. How did this evolution happen?
It began with a choice, Admiral. When our species reached technological maturity, we faced the same decision that all advanced civilizations must eventually face: remain bound by the limitations of physical existence, or transcend those boundaries. The shimmering patterns in the air grew more complex, forming shapes that hurt to look at directly but somehow conveyed vast meaning. Most species choose to remain physical, finding meaning and purpose within the boundaries of normal spacetime. This is a valid path, and we respect it. But humans chose differently. We chose to grow beyond what we were. But why isolate yourselves? Admiral Korvax asked. Why not share this knowledge with the rest of the galaxy? Because the transition cannot be forced or rushed, and it cannot be achieved by all species in the same way. Each sapient race must find its own path to transcendence, if that is indeed their choice. Our presence in normal spacetime during this transition period creates complications for species still bound by physical laws. What kind of complications? Our very existence warps local spacetime in ways that can be dangerous to normal matter. Our thoughts generate energy fields that can disrupt electronic systems. Our emotional states can create gravitational anomalies. Until our transition is complete, we must maintain isolation for the safety of all. The human's words were followed by a demonstration. Without warning, every piece of electronic equipment on the bridge flickered and went dark for several seconds. When the lights came back on, all the displays showed perfectly accurate star charts, but they were drawn in a style no computer in the fleet could have generated. That was just the effect of our attention focusing on your ship, the human voice explained. Imagine the chaos if our entire civilization were to interact freely with yours during this unstable phase of our development. Admiral Korvax stared at the altered displays. How long until your transition is complete? Soon, Admiral. Very soon. That is why we are communicating with you now. When we depart, we will leave behind this region of space, but we will also leave behind something that may be valuable to your civilizations. What will you leave behind? Knowledge, Admiral. Not the knowledge of how to become what we have become, but knowledge that may help your species and others make their own choices about their future development. We will leave detailed records of our transition, scientific data about the nature of reality beyond the physical, and tools that may be useful for species ready to begin their own journeys of growth. The patterns in the air began to fade, and the strange sensation of the human presence started to withdraw. But we must warn you, the voice continued, now sounding more distant. The knowledge we leave behind will be dangerous in the wrong hands. It must be approached with wisdom and great care. Some species may not be ready for these revelations for thousands of years. Others may be ready now. How will we know which species are ready? Captain Zekthara asked. The same way we knew humans were ready 3 centuries ago. The answers will become obvious when the right questions are asked by minds prepared to handle the truth. Admiral Korvax stepped closer to the center of the bridge. When will this departure happen? Soon. Perhaps days, perhaps weeks by your time measurement. When it happens, it will be unmistakable. The energy signatures will be visible from hundreds of light years away. Will we ever see humans again? There was a long pause before the voice answered, and when it did, there was something almost like sadness in its tone. Perhaps, Admiral. In time. When your species and others in this galaxy have grown and evolved and perhaps chosen their own paths beyond the physical, our paths may cross again in dimensions that do not yet exist for you. Wait, Admiral Korvax called out, we have more questions. We know you do, and we wish we could provide more answers. But extended communication in this manner is dangerous for both of us. Our presence in your thoughts could cause permanent changes to your neural patterns. Already we have shared more than is safe. The shimmer in the air was almost gone now, but the voice continued, do not fear what is coming, Admiral. The departure of humanity from this region will not harm your civilizations. If anything, it may help them by removing a source of instability from local spacetime. And the knowledge we leave behind, use it wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence. For long minutes, nobody spoke. The crew stared at the displays, at the star charts drawn in impossible detail by alien minds, at the readings showing that human ships still waited motionless at their border. Finally, Admiral Korvax turned to Captain Zekthara. Captain, I want you to maintain position here and monitor the human border continuously. Whatever is about to happen,
we need to document everything. Yes, Admiral. What about the rest of the fleet?
I'm sending half the ships back to Council space to prepare for whatever comes next. The other half will remain here with us. He paused, looking out the viewport toward the invisible boundary where human space began.
Captain, I think we're about to witness something that will change our understanding of the universe itself.
Over the following days, the activity in human space increased dramatically. Energy readings that had been constant fluctuated wildly.
New structures appeared and disappeared in their border systems. Most disturbing of all, space itself seemed to be changing near the human territory.
Captain, her science officer reported on the 5th day, I'm detecting gravitational anomalies throughout the sector.
It's as if spacetime is becoming unstable. Dangerous?
Not to us at this distance, but anything closer to the human border might experience severe effects.
Time dilation, spatial distortion, may be worse. Captain Zekthara studied the readings.
Whatever the humans were preparing for, it was bigger than anyone had imagined. The energy building up in their region of space was equivalent to the output of multiple star systems. Sir, her communications officer called out, I'm detecting massive energy surges throughout human space.
All their ships are moving.
On the main display, hundreds of human vessels began to move in perfect coordination. They weren't heading toward Council space or any other inhabited region.
Instead, they were converging on a single point deep within their territory. What are they doing? Unknown, ma'am.
But, the energy readings are off the scale.
As they watched, more human ships appeared from every system in their territory. Not hundreds now, but thousands.
They were coming together in the deepest part of human space, forming a massive sphere of vessels around something at the center.
Captain, Admiral Korvax's voice came through from his flagship. Are you seeing this?
Yes, Admiral.
What do you think they're doing?
I think they're about to leave our reality entirely.
The convergence of human ships took 3 days to complete.
By the time the last vessel arrived at the gathering point, over 5,000 ships of impossible design had formed a perfect sphere around something that Captain Zekthara's sensors couldn't identify. What's at the center of their formation? She asked her science officer.
Unknown, Captain.
Our sensors show empty space, but that can't be right.
The gravitational readings indicate something with the mass of a small moon is located at the exact center of their fleet.
Admiral Korvax had moved his flagship closer to the stellar wind, and both ships now maintained position at the very edge of safe sensor range. Every instrument they had was focused on the human gathering, recording data that would puzzle scientists for generations.
Captain, her communications officer announced, we're receiving another transmission from the humans.
Put it through. This time, the voice that came through their speakers was different. Instead of the collective harmony they'd heard before, this was clearly a single human individual. The voice was warm, almost familiar, as if speaking to old friends. Captain Zekthara, Admiral Korvax, and all the brave souls who have chosen to witness our departure, we thank you. Your presence here gives meaning to this moment in ways you may not understand.
Who am I speaking with? Admiral Korvax asked.
I am Sarah Chen, speaker for the human collective and the last individual among us who remembers what it was like to be bound by normal physical laws. I volunteered to maintain my original form until the end, so that we could communicate with you in a manner you would understand.
Sarah, Captain Zekthara found herself saying, surprised by her own informal tone, what exactly is happening over there?
We are completing our transformation, Captain.
What you see as 5,000 ships is actually one entity now. We have merged our vessels, our consciousness, our very existence into something new.
Something that cannot exist in normal spacetime. The displays on both ships suddenly showed a close-up view of the human fleet, impossibly detailed considering the distance. The ships were no longer separate entities. They had somehow merged together, their hulls flowing like liquid metal to form a single massive structure that defied geometric description. The sphere you see is just the three-dimensional shadow of what we have become, Sarah's voice explained.
We now exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously.
What remains in your normal space is merely the small portion of ourselves that still touches this level of reality.
Sarah, Admiral Korvax said slowly, are you still human?
There was a pause, and, when Sarah answered, her voice carried a note of wonder.
That is a question I cannot fully answer, Admiral. We are what humans chose to become.
Whether that makes us still human or something entirely new, perhaps that is for others to decide.
What will happen to this region of space when you leave?
The space we occupied will return to normal, though it may take several months for local spacetime to fully stabilize.
The planets we moved will remain in their new positions. The knowledge archives we have prepared will become accessible once our departure is complete.
Captain Zekthara leaned forward.
What kind of knowledge are you leaving behind?
Everything we learned about the nature of reality beyond the physical, Captain.
Mathematical frameworks that describe higher dimensions.
Technologies that can manipulate space and time on local levels. Philosophical insights about consciousness and existence that may help other species make their own choices about their future development.
Why share this with us? Why not keep it for yourselves?
Because growth without purpose is meaningless, Captain. We grew beyond our original nature not to become gods ruling over lesser beings, but to explore possibilities that physical existence could not contain. Part of that exploration involves seeing what other forms of consciousness will do with the same opportunities we were given. The image on their displays changed, showing what looked like vast crystalline structures floating in space near the human sphere. They pulsed with their own inner light and seemed to exist partially outside normal space.
These are the archives, Sarah explained.
Each one contains terabytes of information about advanced science, philosophy, and technology. But they will only activate for species that demonstrate they are ready for such knowledge. Attempts to study them by unprepared minds will yield nothing but incomprehensible data.
How will species know if they're ready? Admiral Korvax asked. The same way humans knew we were ready 3 centuries ago.
When a species begins asking questions about the fundamental nature of reality, when they start to suspect that physical existence might not be the ultimate form of consciousness, when they develop the wisdom to use knowledge responsibly rather than as a tool for domination, then they will be ready. The sphere of merged human vessels began to glow with an inner light that was visible even to their distant sensors. Energy readings climbed to levels that should have torn apart local spacetime, but somehow reality remained stable.
Admiral, Captain, Sarah's voice continued, we are beginning the final phase of our departure.
What you are about to see may be disturbing or confusing.
Please remember that we are not dying or being destroyed.
We are simply moving beyond the limitations of this dimensional framework.
Sarah, Captain Zekthara called out, will we ever understand what you've become?
Perhaps, Captain. If your species chooses to grow beyond its current limitations. If they develop the courage to question the boundaries of physical existence. If they learn that consciousness is not limited to biological neural networks but is a fundamental property of reality itself. The glow surrounding the human sphere intensified until it became difficult to look at directly, even through filtered displays. Space around the humans began to ripple and bend as if reality itself was being stretched. The knowledge we leave behind includes instructions for species that choose to follow a similar path, Sarah continued, her voice becoming somehow more distant despite the clarity of the transmission. But it also includes warnings about the dangers and responsibilities that come with transcendence.
Power without wisdom leads to destruction.
Growth without purpose becomes meaningless. Evolution without compassion creates monsters.
What advice would you give to species that find your archives? Admiral Korvax asked.
Study carefully.
Proceed slowly.
Remember that the goal is not power over others, but freedom from the limitations that prevent true understanding. And never forget that consciousness, in all its forms, is precious and worthy of respect. The ripples in space around the human sphere were becoming more pronounced. It looked as if reality was being folded in ways that three-dimensional minds couldn't fully comprehend. Admiral, Captain, we must complete our departure now. The longer we remain partially in your dimensional framework, the greater the risk of causing irreparable damage to local spacetime.
Wait, Captain Zekthara called out, one more question. Why did humans choose this path? What made you willing to give up physical existence?
Sarah's answer came just as the space around the human sphere began to tear apart, because we realized that consciousness is not a product of matter and energy, Captain. matter and energy are products of consciousness.
Physical reality is just one small room in an infinite mansion of existence. We chose to explore the other rooms.
What happened next would be studied and debated by galactic scientists for centuries. The human sphere didn't explode or vanish. Instead, it simply ceased to exist in normal spacetime while somehow remaining visible. It became a three-dimensional hole in reality through which impossible vistas could be glimpsed. Through that hole, the crews of the Council ships saw wonders that challenged every assumption about the nature of existence. Structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Landscapes that followed geometric rules unknown to conventional mathematics. Beings of pure consciousness moving through spaces where thought and reality were indistinguishable. And then, in an instant that lasted both forever and no time at all, the hole closed. The human sphere was gone. The region of space they had occupied was empty except for the crystalline archives floating serenely in the vacuum. Sensors report normal spacetime readings throughout the sector, Captain Zekthara's science officer announced, his voice filled with awe. Whatever they did, it left no trace except those archive structures. Admiral Korvax's voice came through the communications link, Captain, I want full sensor sweeps of this entire region.
Document everything.
And I want teams prepared to study those archives, carefully and slowly.
Yes, Admiral.
What do we tell the Council?
The truth.
That humanity has transcended physical existence and left behind knowledge that could change the course of galactic civilization. And that we'd better be very careful how we use that knowledge. Over the following weeks, the Council ships conducted exhaustive surveys of the former human territory. They found the moved planets still in their perfect orbital patterns, functioning ecosystems intact but empty of human life. They found the living space habitats, now dormant but still maintaining themselves through unknown processes. And they found hundreds of the crystalline archives scattered throughout the region. Initial attempts to study the archives yielded exactly what Sarah had predicted, incomprehensible data that meant nothing to conventional scientific instruments. But, when researchers began approaching them with questions about the fundamental nature of consciousness and reality, the archives responded with information that was both accessible and profound. Captain Zekthara volunteered to remain in the former human territory as part of a joint council research station. Her ship, the Stellar Wind, became the command vessel for the most important scientific project in galactic history, the careful, methodical study of human transcendence archives. Captain's log, supplemental, she recorded 6 months after the human departure.
We've made our first real breakthrough in understanding the archive data. The humans left us more than just scientific information.
They left us a roadmap for consciousness evolution, along with detailed warnings about the pitfalls and dangers. She paused, looking out at the crystalline archives floating in the space that had once held impossible human cities. The most significant discovery is that humans weren't the first species to choose this path. The archives contain references to dozens of other civilizations throughout galactic history that reached similar decision points. Some chose transcendence, some chose to remain physical, and some. She paused again, consulting her notes, some chose paths we don't yet understand. The question now facing the Galactic Council is what to do with this knowledge. The archives make it clear that the information should be shared freely with any species ready to receive it. But, they also warn that premature exposure could be catastrophic. 3 years after the human departure, Captain Zekthara stood on the observation deck of the research station that had been built around the largest archive cluster. The region that had once been mysterious empty space on galactic star charts was now the most studied volume in the galaxy. Commander, her new science officer said, approaching with a data pad, we've received applications from 17 different species requesting access to the advanced archives. The evaluation committee has approved 3 of them.
Which species? The Etherians, surprisingly enough.
It turns out their natural ability to shift between different states of matter is actually a primitive form of dimensional manipulation. The archives responded to their queries almost immediately.
And the other 2?
The collective minds of Rigel 7 and humans. Captain Zekthara looked up sharply.
Humans? I thought they all transcended. Not all, apparently. We've been contacted by human colonies in other parts of the galaxy that were established before the main human civilization began its transition.
They're asking for access to understand what their species chose to become.
It was a sobering thought.
Somewhere in the galaxy, humans still lived normal physical lives, unaware that their species had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history.
What about the other 14 applications?
Declined.
Most show promise but aren't quite ready.
A few.
The science officer hesitated.
What about the others?
A few showed concerning motivations.
Species that seem to view transcendence as a path to power rather than understanding. The archives won't respond to them at all.
Captain Zekthara nodded.
This was exactly what Sarah had warned them about. The knowledge left behind by humanity was powerful beyond imagination, but it came with its own built-in safeguards.
Any word from the transcended humans themselves?
Nothing direct.
But some of our researchers report occasional sensations. Brief moments where they feel as if they're being observed or guided.
Nothing provable, but the pattern is consistent. They're still watching?
It's possible. Sarah did say they would continue to exist in dimensions beyond our perception.
Maybe they're keeping an eye on how we use their gift.
That evening, alone in her quarters, Captain Zekthara updated her personal log. It's been 3 years since humanity departed our reality, and we're still just beginning to understand what they accomplished. The archives have given us technologies that have revolutionized our understanding of physics, medicines that work by directly manipulating the quantum structures of disease, and philosophical frameworks that have changed how we think about consciousness itself.
But perhaps the most important thing they've given us is a choice.
For the first time in galactic history, we know that physical existence is not the only path available to sapient species. We know that it's possible to grow beyond the limitations of matter and energy while retaining consciousness and purpose. Some species are already showing signs of interest in following humanity's path. Others are using the human knowledge to enhance their physical existence in ways that were never before possible. And some are taking entirely different approaches, using human discoveries as stepping stones to paths that even the humans never explored.
The galaxy is changing.
The old maps that showed empty space where humans lived are being redrawn.
That region is no longer mysterious or forbidden. It's become the birthplace of a new age of galactic civilization. But the maps still don't tell the whole truth. They show the archives, the research stations, the wonders left behind by humanity. What they can't show is the real legacy of human transcendence, the knowledge that consciousness is limitless, that existence extends far beyond what our senses can perceive, and that every species in the galaxy has the potential to become something greater than they ever imagined. The galactic map no longer ends at human space. It begins there.
Captain Zekthara closed her log and walked to her viewport, looking out at the crystalline archives that sparkled with their own inner light. Somewhere beyond the reach of her sensors, beyond the boundaries of normal spacetime, humanity continued its journey into realms of existence that had no names in any galactic language. But they had left behind a gift more precious than any technology or scientific discovery, proof that growth and transcendence were possible, and a roadmap for any species brave enough to follow their own path beyond the limitations of physical reality.
The galaxy would never be the same.
And Captain Zekthara knew that was exactly what humanity had intended.